Thank you, my dear colleagues and friends who have walked this journey with me, all of us together in the past year, training on flow neuroscience and all the magic of flow. We have been on this series of Masters of Flow summer talks in the past few weeks, having live conversations, sharing with each other in our communities, all the wonderful things that we have learned and the game-changing abilities of flow and in high productivity. So I'm very happy to be here with you all, wrapping up this series. And today we want to leave you with some gems, some practical steps and tools, and actually some of the, I don't want to say the bad guys, but definitely the mischievous ones. Today we're going to talk about the mischievous ones, the misleading ones, the flow blockers, and some practical tools to leave you guys with on how we have learned how to manage these flow blockers and how actually to turn them to our favor and to our clients' favor and to all of our loved ones. So I'm not going to introduce everybody because we've all had our live talks, and I invite everybody who's watching this to go to our playlist and watch all of the live streams. An overall explanation of what the flow blockers are, right? So we've been talking about flow, and just like there are preconditions, things that actually help us get into flow, there are also the conditions that actually block our flow. So officially, there's been many flow blockers that have been identified. We're just going to touch up on some of them, some of the key ones, the ones that I guess we have most of our experience with, or benefit that we've seen the most benefits with. Probably the most popular one that we all would love to hear about, and that's distraction. So one of the flow blockers, the biggest, the mischievous one, is distractions. And I like to invite John to talk a little bit about distractions. And John, if you can just say just a few words about your coaching niche.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Iris. So I assist high achieving professionals experiencing the gnawing agitation of knowing they're capable of far more than their current position demands, who yearn for more fulfilling work, discover what they're actually being called to do. So I'm going to talk about distractions that we all encounter to trying to access a flow state. And there are a lot of them. I'll start off by one of the most obvious ones is cognitive overload or context switching. So flow, the state of flow thrives in deep focus, but the modern workplace demands rapid task shifting from emails to chats to meetings. And each one of these shifts or switches carries a reentry cost. Studies show that there's anywhere from 15 to 25 minutes to regain the same level of concentration that we had previous to the interruption. So you can appreciate how much time is lost during the course of the day just switching from one task to another. Another distraction is noise and stress reactivity, so or emotional noise. So things like anxiety and rumination, how our minds just they drift to certain things and wander away, and to oftentimes unresolved emotional tensions that can hijack our prefrontal cortex, which is the same circuitry that supports flow. So the idea is that not only there are external noises that interfere with our or distract us, but also internal chatter that we carry into our tasks. That the mental processes that go on inside our minds that trip us up. One of the most common distractions, of course, is the smartphones, our smartphones, social media, push notifications that exploit the same reward pathways that flow requires. So, and it's the thing is, it's not just the sounds of the pings and the noises of the notifications, but it's also the anticipation that we experience. There's the anticipation is a variable reward system that keeps the brain restless and scanning in a scanning state, and this robs us of the same dopamine. So you can consider it as like dopamine fasting, or dopamine fasting is a solution for it, where we get into periods where we remove our phones from our environment, turn them off is probably best, and check them like periodically throughout the day, like maybe at lunchtime and the end of the day. Or setting up app blockers. There are blockers that are available, technology tools that can limit, or that you can set timers on, so that your phone doesn't interfere with your work until certain, you set a time for like 90 minutes or 3 hours or however long. Then there are environmental factors like, the workspace that you set up around you, things like, temperature, lighting, acoustics, even the air quality that you have in your space. So you can architect for flow by setting up your workspace to accommodate or allow yourself to access flow states more easily, and not and remove distractions. As I mentioned, remove your phone from your workspace, put it in another room, or better yet, turn it off completely.
Yeah. All great pointers. Distraction, task switching, anticipation, environmental cues. Those are all really powerful, especially in our world today. And if anybody wants to add something to that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, so there's also things like identity and value misalignment. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm losing my notes here. So
Yeah.
Identity.
I could add something. I could add something, John. I mean, your descriptions trigger experiences with clients that I have, and I think particularly the distraction blockers. I've been surprised with the working practices of senior leaders as you talk about that constant email on, and working with them to really reduce those email attentions. I have some clients right at SVP and senior levels who will seek to answer emails all the time, DM messages, and I think we've all experienced that with their leaders. And not being aware of the cost which you've talked about around that, and also the phones. It's been one of the big successes in my experience, and I'm sure the same with you, about taking the phones out of the room. It feels a real sacrifice for the clients, yet something that they then see to be incredibly valuable. And all of this gives them time to focus on more time to focus on the really critical things.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is identifying what are the most critical functions and tasks that you need to be addressing. Is it your phone, or is it the work at hand? And it seems to me the work at hand should be the most critical aspect of work. So carve out time to do your most important work. And I also want to touch on identity and value misalignment, which is critical to my work with my clients. And it's subtle but potent when the work itself feels disconnected from your personal meeting. Distractions multiply because the mind seeks more resonant stimulation. So the distractions become a signal for that we're doing work that's not aligned with what our most important values and our identity is. In other words, it could be a signal that the work you're doing isn't aligned with what you really want to be doing, and you could just be working at a job or a career or tasks that you'd rather not be working at all.
Yeah. And as you're talking about distraction and what you're mentioning as well, Sandra, with all of this, I guess, need to answer emails and everything, it makes me think of overwhelm. And overwhelm is also a big flow blocker. And I would like to invite Maxim to give us some of his experience on overwhelm as a flow blocker.
When was the last time you feel overwhelmed? You just don't have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to do what you really wanted to do. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a lot of ideas. And usually in the midst of thinking of one idea, another idea will just come out. And as someone who think out loud and speak my idea, people get easily confused as, are you changing your mind or you talking about another idea? And it can be overwhelming both for me and the entrepreneur and for those who are listening to me to follow for my instruction. After some time, they will go like, okay, Maxim, you say like 10 different ideas now for the last like 10 minutes. So which one should I be doing? So it caused both cognitive overload, both for me and also for my team. And it happened a lot. And because I have a natural tendency to think of new ideas as I speak, and also someone who always think towards the future. I have taken this thing called the 𝗕𝗟𝗪 strength. It shows me that I have futuristic and ideation. So I will think forward and ideate as I talk along the way. And the worst thing is the overwhelm get too much when the more I talk. The more I talk, the more I think, the clearer my thinking was, but also the confused people that listen to me, they got confused, like, are you thinking out loud now or are you giving me instruction? I do not know about you guys, but for me, I'm an entrepreneur and there's so many things going on, so many dynamics. If let's say you are an employee or you are self-employed, the dynamic might be different and the overwhelm may look different, may feel different, but somehow for another, if you hear the word overwhelm, it implies a cognitive overload, or it can be also emotional overload. So what do we do with this? What are the things that we can do to do it preemptively? So this is also the reason why I learned flow, right? I believe that, I can be free from the slave of overwhelm. I don't want to be overwhelmed by, my own ideas or my own activities, because I always try to do so many things at the same time. So having that belief, and I always look for a solution, then that's why I go and learn this flow trainer accelerator at first. Then of course I met the courses got upgraded into the performance neuroscience coaching. This is where I meet all these wonderful people, and that's also having me going through that transformation journey, learning some of those disciplines of how to get into the state of flow at will. So first thing first, what I learned is really to have the calendar surrender, to be very disciplined with the time. That is level one. But sometimes disciplining with the time is not enough when I don't have the mental or the emotional capacity to be there in the time to do what needs to be done. For example, I had a fight with my dad over family business. It takes so much on the emotional and the mental capacity. Or sometimes my children are sick. I just don't have that mental and emotional capacity to do what needs to be done at work. So that get distracted. So what do I need to do before that? So I make sure that not only I block the time, but I clear the space in my mind, in my heart, to make sure that if, let's say, I want to do a strategic planning, for the quarter, I really have like that mental clearing, and sometimes I use GPT to help me think out loud and then clear my thoughts, clear my feeling, or I listen to some guided meditation and get it cleared. And number two, the things that I've learned to do is really to design the nutrition and also the rest, because nowadays, if you see me, I've been wearing this Oura ring for the past 4 years. I've been tracking myself for the past 4 years. So sometimes I can attribute why I'm not feeling such good energy in the day when I look at my sleep statistic. I look at my heart rate variability. I look at my sleep quality, and I have tried so many different things to make sure that I really have that at least 1.5 to 2 hours of deep sleep, including spending $1,000 on my bedroom, on my bed sheet, the blanket that I use, the pillow, the bolster, to make sure that I really have a good sleep. And other than that, make sure that I have my proper nutrition. I used to have like this. I know some of you Oreo fans out there. Over the weekend, sometimes I'll go on a cheat day. I'll have a packet of Oreo with milk, which is like very high in sugar. So I get sick very often. Like, of course, this is one of these days I got sick very often. But no. Now it's not so much because I remove all that from my diet. This is just me getting a bit too tired and overindulged on the sweet stuff in Bali, like recently. But other than that, I've been changing my medication to more like those homeopathy, naturopathy, and have that holistic healing, and have a protocol like hot shower before I sleep, and have a sauna. When I'm sick like this, I go like for a sauna to make sure that I can still have that energy and the capacity to focus. So these are some of the things that I set up intentionally to prepare, to make sure that before the overwhelm comes, I have the capacity to handle, to reject, to navigate the energy, to deflect the attack that comes. I want to, thoughts will just come, but it will be good to have the intentional focus for the next 90 minutes. What is that one thing that I really, really want to do? And then after going through that process, and then I will look, okay, what's working, what's not working, and how do I improve? So in the final note, I just want to say that, overwhelm doesn't mean that you fail. Sometimes I can, when I get overwhelmed, doesn't mean that I feel like because I end up like not doing the things that I want to do. No, overwhelm is just a sign. I noticed that it's just a sign of awareness of the situation, that there is more demand than supply. So how do I counter that? Make sure that before the over demand happen, there is oversupply of energy, space, and capacity mentally, maybe even spiritually, to handle whatever is necessary. So that's how you navigate the flow blocker of overwhelm.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, and a great perspective from an entrepreneur. It's very good awareness that, yeah, we are overloaded with ideas just as much as our colleagues and superiors are at the same time. And
Yeah.
since we're on the topics of overwhelm, and I'd like to go over the topic of exhaustion next, and I'd like to invite Sarah to give us some of her experience on this flow blocker. And Sarah, can you just start with, what is your coaching niche?
So yeah, I'm Sarah Davis, and I work with midlife leaders to support them in performing at their absolute best, not just in work, but with their families, in relationships, across every sphere of life. And that is, born out of my lived experience as a leader who has plenty of experience with exhaustion. And actually, there was one other thing that I heard recently that plays back into Maxim's overwhelm, and it was a really short way of cutting to that point where Maxim was saying 90 minutes, what is it that I need to do? And it was played as, you're not overwhelmed, you're underdecided. And that just was that's lived with me. It's maybe a few weeks now since I heard that, because it speaks into that clarity of what are we doing. So once we have clarity about what we want to focus on, we do need to be energized to then execute on that priority. And exhaustion is a huge flow blocker for, when we're physically tired. It's just going to be hard to bring ourselves to focus. It's, and concentration requires a lot of energy. So if we're dragging ourselves out of bed in the morning, it's going to be hard to get engaged to do high quality work. And then we add on to that the mental fatigue. And I think it's, there's a certain irony to talking about exhaustion at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, when I know in my life I have been limping to 6 o'clock on a Friday night, going, just get there, because that week has run my battery out mentally and physically. So that, we've talked around cognitive overload. Well, that is amplified by exhaustion. It's just, we have all experienced when we're tired, it's really hard to make decisions, which then will lead us into overwhelm. And it's really hard to concentrate to do quality work. It's, Friday afternoon was definitely admin, if I could manage that at all. Then there's, what else does exhaustion not help with? It can often lead us into states of higher anxiety, amplifying stress. And when that emotional state is there, it's really challenging to maintain a calm, focused mindset, which is absolutely essential to access flow. And the other thing is that it can exacerbate negative thought patterns, which further, that this probably links into something that Sandra will talk about, but that negative mindset then becomes a mental barrier, which blocks you from engaging in whatever you want to get done. We can also get really frustrated and therefore disengaged with what we're doing when we're not, I want to do this in this next 90 minutes, but I'm only here. But that's because I'm exhausted. I'm not ready to perform at a high level. And there's the list goes on. Our cognitive load that John was talking about, exhaustion reduces the amount of brain power that we have available, which makes it more difficult to process information and respond to those challenges effectively, which makes it easier to become distracted. I'll just, what's that over there that needs tidying? Or, that email is pinged. Maybe that will be something that I can, get done. But that all pulls us farther away from that focused state that we need to be able to access flow state. So there's a lot of, links between, exhaustion erodes our motivation and puts us in a negative mindset. It can put us into overwhelm faster than we normally would, and it can lead us down the path to distraction in whatever way that takes really easily. And yet the solve for exhaustion is very unsexy, and it speaks back to something that Maxim was talking about. It's recovery, of which sleep is like the foundation of our recovery practice. If we're not hitting, that 7-8 hours a night that is so well researched, we're going to find it hard to re-energize ourselves day after day. And I had a conversation with a client recently who was in a difficult situation at work, and I checked in on a Friday evening and just said, "Where's your battery? What charge has your battery?" And it was like, "Oh, 18%." And so like, oh, I felt that for them. And then go, how do you get yourself back to even 72% by Monday? And then you're in that constant cycle. So sleep has to be our foundation. But then there's also so many other easily accessible practices that we can do every day. We all have a pair of lungs and a nose, so we can use breath work to calm ourselves, to energize ourselves. If we're working with our breath and we take a longer inhale than an exhale, that will energize us. So if you're on the floor, but you've got a big meeting where you want to lift yourself, breathing in for a count of 5 and out for a shorter count, so a count of 3, that could help lift that state. Then there are things like Maxim already mentioned. Meditation practice can really help us switch those brains off and assist our recovery, because it's about, I think when I think about recovery in the sports world, I've been watching a lot of athletics over the summer. Athletes train and recover in order to perform, and it's a real cycle. Whereas I think in the rest of our life, it's just, no, I can push on through. It's Monday to Friday is work and Saturday, Sunday is recovery. But I think changing the thinking to build in some active recovery in a structured way every day, an hour of an active recovery, just to be clear, isn't Netflix and a glass of wine. As enjoyable as that is passive relaxation. That's numbing us. It's not refilling us. So active recovery might be taking a sauna. Maxim said that already. Might be getting in a cold shower. You were a hot shower before bed guy. But getting out in nature, doing some exercise, connecting in real life with a friend. There's nothing revolutionary about these practices, but in my experience and talking with clients that I work with, they're sometimes the first things that get dropped out of our schedule to just work another hour, or if I could just get this done. But flipping that mindset to build in recovery will increase our baseline every day, rather than reducing it and eroding it. So yeah, and I have seen the active recovery with some of my clients. They're like, oh my gosh, instead of slumping on the sofa when I get in, I'm going for a walk with my dog and my youngest son, and I actually feel better for doing more exercise. I didn't think that was gonna, it's counterintuitive to some of us. I just need to sit down. So yeah, I think it's just experimenting with some of these practices, and making a note for yourself about, okay, well, today I did this and it resulted in that feeling. Because I think we're capable of controlling things that I think we've forgotten we are, and just taking a bit of that control back is a huge positive impact in our ability to access flow, to get more of those really meaningful things done.
Beautifully said. And these flow blockers, exhaustion, overwhelm, distractions, these are certainly staples of our lives today, and especially as we cross through midlife, we're all seeing that. And I think learning the science behind how all of these flow blockers are, what they're really doing to us, and just blocking flow one day, but they're also sabotaging our bodies, our well-being, and our overall lives. So I think these are very important topics to cover. And we have some other very key important flow blockers coming up. We have Harland and Sandra and Beth and Rory covering some really very interesting and hidden and also very important flow blockers. But I just want to chime in here because you mentioned something, Sarah, that you said that exhaustion erodes motivation. And motivation is also a very key blocker, a big blocker, and actually it's been really detrimental in my journey as I moved through my midlife crisis and how I discovered that motivation is a big flow blocker as well as a big flow trigger. And as I was moving through my midlife crisis and my moment of complete burnout in my corporate career as a corporate executive communications executive, and in my life, just, you know, overwhelm, burnout, exhaustion, all of that. And I really realized, or at least I thought in the moment, like, well, I'm not motivated to do anything. Like anything that I ever started, I would lose the motivation very quickly. So I'd be excited in the beginning of a new job, of a new promotion, of a relationship, of a new country. I'd be, you know, really curious and I'd have lots of passion. I'd be excited and I'd have this very high motivation, but then it would very quickly run out. And so part of my burnout in my early 40s was exactly that I was tired of going through these cycles of, you know, being motivated and then flopping. My motivation just was not sustainable. And as I went on my inner journey and kind of stepped away from my overall life and just did a lot of inner work, and I started training in emotional freedom technique, tapping, which is a form of therapy that combines Chinese wisdom with modern cognitive therapy. And as I made all of this emotional space, let's say I released a lot of emotional overload, I came into this moment of, okay, what do I do next with my life? And I want to do something that doesn't motivate me just for a year or two. And when I encountered flow, one of the things that really like drew me into the flow world was Stephen Kotler's work on what was called the motivation recipe, the passion recipe, which was kind of like a basic five-step exercise and way to identify what is your massively transforming purpose. And it was really such a mind opener for me to recognize how intrinsic motivators are one of the foundations to getting into flow and sustaining flow. So when you're passionate about something, you love skiing, you love writing, you love singing or dancing, you love it anytime you do it. You don't just love it for 1 year and then you don't love it anymore. It's something that you always love doing. And I realized that what I was doing in my work wasn't something that I loved doing consistently, because I was working in the corporate world, and the corporate world was very profit oriented, was very, not so much in the human solving world problems kind of sphere. And that's what I recognized. I recognized that I was lacking that sustainable motivation because my values were not really aligned with what I was doing, because I hadn't really identified what my intrinsic motivators were. What my work wasn't really what I was passionate about. I was curious, but curiosity would kind of drop off really quickly. And in the flow triggers, one of the key flow triggers is curiosity, passion, and purpose. And here I was thinking, well, you know, I always feel like purposeful. Like I always want to do something that has this big meaning, that solves some world problems. But I wasn't doing it, I guess, sustainably enough or well-structured enough for it to sustain in the long run. And so then I realized that, okay, well, maybe I wasn't a communications expert, because communications is something that is intrinsic and natural to me, but what I was communicating on wasn't really what I was deeply, let's say, passionate about. And as I've been in this journey of discovering what is well-being, what is true fulfillment, what is what we are really seeking in this life, I recognize that this is what I'm passionate about. And this makes me want to keep doing this all the time, not just one day. So motivation was an entry into the next version of how I want to create and how I want to work in the world. I don't want to work 9 to 5 and burn out and just burn the midnight oil and just keep recycling the same version that just doesn't work, because will always lead to exhaustion, to overwhelm, to self-sabotage. And I said, well, I don't know another way. I haven't learned another way. I've only learned how to work in the corporate world. And that's why when this flow world opened up, it was just so fascinating, because it just showed me that there is another way, right? We're discovering this. We are now finding out that that if you identify your flow blockers, your flow triggers, what you are intrinsically attracted towards and passionate about, then you can create a life of flow that not only fulfills you, not only makes it possible for us to achieve the things that we want to achieve, but it also creates sustainable and long-term well-being for ourselves and for our families. So I found motivation so powerful that I went on this journey, and I discovered my own biggest passions, my biggest curiosities, and where they intersect is where our highest purpose really is. And as I played this game and I discovered that my biggest purpose in life, the thing that fulfills me the most, and that it's my North Star, it never changes and it always fires me up, is mastering this game of life. And everything that I do, that's why I do it, because I love becoming masterful at things. And so this has become also now one of my programs that I've had the pleasure of experiencing with several clients and colleagues, and it's been a game changer. So I just wanted to speak to the motivation piece, which I think is a big piece especially in our midlife transition, because I think midlife transition, that's exactly what the second phase of our life is asking for, right? It's asking us to live a life that is fulfilling. And yeah, and after motivation, I would love to invite Sandra and speak a little bit to how we self-sabotage, because that has been one of my mischievous best friends as well. And I think many of us.
Fabulous, fabulous, thank you. So I'm an executive coach, 25 years now, and what I've noticed over that period is the amount of stress that's appearing in with the senior leaders that I work. Overwhelm, long hours, we've heard so much about this, exhaustion, self-doubt. And that led me really to look at two particular areas. So I really help senior women who are in career transition and going from VP to C-suite to, we could say thrive in their new roles and deliver immediate business impact. But why is that important? 40% of new leader promotions fail, which is an extraordinary statistic. And actually support in that vein from an external coach can cut down ramp up time by 50%. So there's a lot to go here, but then how do you create the space to do that? And that's what brought me into the flow work. How can we create that? Move from the exhaustion that Sarah talked about, clear that space in mind and heart that Maxime talked about, to be able to start looking at how we work. And I love coaching and I love learning, and this felt just a beautiful place to be. So I'm going to talk about actually just one element of self-sabotage, because I think Beth will probably answer a few of them, and maybe slightly different to where we've been looking so far. So we've heard a lot about those external flow blockers, distraction, overwhelm, and exhaustion. I think what I'd like to focus on is one element of the internal saboteur, the one that strikes you when you're winning. So you could argue, you know, when we're in our flow state, you know, so you could argue that self-sabotage has two forms and there's more subtleties to that. One of getting into it, and then one of how do we maintain it and don't get ejected from it. And we know, we've heard about the entry ones, you know, the procrastination, can't get started, the delays, but this is almost success consciousness self-sabotage. And what's behind it is the research shows that, you know, we become self-aware, we can become self-aware when we're in our peak performance. And that's when our prefrontal cortex comes back online, breaks the flow. And it's that sort of difference between I can't get started to I was crushing it and then I lost momentum. And it's that transition point. Many of us get the microflow. I get the microflow, you know, that good work session feeling. But it's that macro flow, that sustained performance over hours. You know, I'm learning, I get into flow, I'm learning to manage distractions, I'm learning to keep the stimulations low, but I do pop out every now and then, you know, and that's when, you know, that's when my ego comes in and it says, you know, wow, this is going great. Now I can go and do something else. So it's really that, how do we hold that? And it's a bit like a cyclist, you know, you're cycling along behind someone else, let's say, okay, a road cyclist, serious cycling. But then you think, oh, I'm going to pull out in front of this guy that I'm kind of sitting behind because I want to know how fast I can cycle. And that's when that measurement action is what kind of breaks the flow and increases the efforts. So the science is that, you know, the flow requires a brain state where self-consciousness quiets down. We all know this. And that decreased activity in the prefrontal cortex, that normally, that's the one that handles our kind of inner awareness, our inner criticism. You know, yet our brains and the leaders that we work with, you know, our brains are trained to be in control, and we've been rewarded our whole lives for being consciously competent. So it's almost like that very success consciousness that got us there becomes the barrier from going deeper. So what happens? What can we do when we've managed so many of the parameters that we've talked about so far, and we're in flow, and then we find ourselves being pulled out? And it's, you know, one thing that Sarah specifically spoke about, and it's breathing. And to be honest, I wouldn't have spoken about breathing that much in my coaching. It wasn't really necessarily over the years that people have been open to, but they're much more now. And so, you know, Sarah, you spoke about a particular practice. I mean, one of the great ones for when you find yourself being pulled out of flow, you know, is that 3-2-10 breath. You know, 3 seconds in through your nose, 2-second hold without constricting your throat, and then that 10 seconds slow release through your mouth. And 3 rounds of that can regulate your nervous system, and that kind of signals to your ego, we're staying here. And so the element that I want to talk about, you know, there's a lot of talk, really important talk on starting flow, and this is actually about sustaining it. So the question moving from not how do I get into it, but how do I stay there when my ego wants to take, almost like that victory lap. So if there's 3 things that I'd like to, you know, for the listeners to take away. First, self-sabotage can happen during success, not just before it. Secondly, surrendering. For some reason, I find surrender hard to say, but surrendering is your gateway to peak performance. It's about letting go of control in order to gain that impact. And so recognizing, the third point, recognizing what's happening, regulating through the breath, that equals the flow recovery. So it's a small element of self-sabotage that I wanted to talk about, and a little bit different to the opposite of some of the blockers that we've been talking to. And I don't know if anyone wants to say anything in relation to that, anything else to add?
I I love the idea of what you've spoken to there, that we self-sabotage when we're winning, because I think it's a lot of how self-sabotage is perceived is in preventing you getting started. So that is, I find that really valuable, Sandra, and I think people listening in as well. And, you know, can we form the breath work and talking about nervous system more in that, 2 years ago in my old role, if you talked to me about nervous system regulation, I would have gone, oof, that's some kind of, I don't know, that doesn't apply to me.
Out there.
Yeah, a bit woo. And yet, the more I have learned, the more we all need to learn about how we can, because it's again, it's within us. We can do things to control it, and we can make different choices to support ourselves. So yeah, I'm definitely at the front of the bus for widening that conversation, because it's really powerful for people to realize.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, very, very relatable. And I think we can all resonate to that level of burnout. It's probably one of the biggest culprits of high performers and high achievers for sure. And before I give the word to Harland and to Beth, who have also some very interesting and all-encompassing flow blockers to talk about, I'd like to invite Rory really quickly just to bring in one last piece on the individual parts of the flow blockers and talk a little bit about burnout as a flow blocker.
Thanks, Iris. It's been a pleasure. It's a pleasure to hear everyone speaking into these different topics and how they are seeing all the jigsaw pieces coming together as well around it all. Yeah, I loved what Sarah mentioned just then about the not realizing until you realize all the pieces of the puzzle, the overwhelm leading into exhaustion potentially, and then without realizing what's going on, I can't function at all. I've been through that process in my own journey, very psychologically in my early 20s, and it's certainly something I just got to a point where I just didn't know what was going on. I had this vague thread that I knew it wasn't real what I was thinking, and I got into a loop of complete paranoia, and because of not knowing what was happening, what had happened at that point. And it was because I didn't know how to reach out or speak, or I didn't feel like I knew how to speak my emotions and things like that too. So it was all down to not practicing communication verbally as well. So there's a whole lot of, as an extreme example of burnout, but also it's not to really be banded about too much, because it really is not a useful thing to get into. But sometimes we just learn because we find out, like say they're not realizing until we do realize. Then it's like, okay, right, how do I get back out of this hole? And so there's the idea around the self-sabotage, the overwhelm, and this idea of compounding affects the spiral, and how maybe one blocker is a great opportunity to block more, and then block more, and then block more, and then block more. And so it's noticing these patterns is so important. And there's the idea of the physiology part that I started to study around as well, the physiology of the body, rather than, because a lot of the time we go, okay, overwhelm, I know what that is now, and I know what this is, and I know what that is, and they're all labels of concepts, but what's actually going on in our bodies as well, it could be actual physical tensions, blockages, whatever you want to call it, energy, muscle tension, tone protecting systems. And it's that mind-body connection thing that connects to it all. So That's much more apparent now, a lot more apparent coming out of the pandemic when everyone had to really focus on what was going on in that situation, and feeling, dealing with their isolation of themselves, suddenly being isolated with the relationships they had around them, and all that stuff that was going on. And it's really, mental health is kind of something that can be talked about now, which is a great thing. I think that's a gift that's come from it, at least, around that whole experience. And so yeah, this is sort of the belief systems can and will be giving us the sensations that we're feeling. So that physiological thing that's happening, the belief systems about what's happening, and then the physical sensations that we have, the pain or the exhaustion, the overwhelm that we label it as, is all part of what we believe is going on too. So it's really difficult to just go, okay, yeah, I'll just stop that. I'll just stop doing that, and I'll just stop doing that. And if that inertia of that belief is there, so it's like how to really look at it from a belief system thing is one of the key pieces, I think, to coming back round to like, how do we change up? How do I, regardless of what's actually happening, if I can change my belief about it in some way, shape, or form, then I've got more of a chance of feeling a bit better, even if, so someone with a particular chronic health condition can still enjoy their life, and they could be the happiest person in the world compared to someone that doesn't know what's happening and being undiagnosed with anything. So it's all about individualization on that, and to really recognize and check in about burnout. And I do think it's really important to think about that way, to go, what am I happy with my situation, my life, my work, and all those kind of things too. So when we band around burnout, just be kind to someone that's saying that, because if that's just coming up in the surface, what is that? What is it? Could be massive underneath, and if they don't even know. So yeah, that's what's come up for me.
Yeah, thank you, Rory, for bringing that very important perspective to burnout. That it's not just, overworking. It's really trying to fit into a world. It's trying to put us all into cookie cutters, like an assembly line. And yeah, and burnout is all encompassing for sure. And now that we've heard quite a lot on, and we've weaved really nicely, because all of these flow blockers are so interconnected with each other. And now we've seen how they work on an individual level. We're going to talk about how they work on a group level. And after Harlan gives us his experience and overview of the group flow blockers, and then Beth is going to bring everything together into a very nice way of the mechanics of how do we release all of these blocks. So Harlan, I'd like to invite you to share your part, and just start by saying, what is your expertise and your niche in your work?
My expertise is people. That's the work I've been doing for the last 50 years, is just people. Life is about relationships, as I see it. Very important, the work that we do with people individually to help them if they want to get into flow, which is all of us here and others that we know, and what's blocking them and helping them remove those blocks and move back into it. I love that piece Sandra had there of, even our success can lead to a block. There are lots of them. I was sitting in just a small cafe recently. There are three musicians, one on drum, one on a lead guitar, one was a bass, and they were playing jazz. And they were in flow with each other. And yet I've watched, other groups where they don't. What allowed them to get into flow? What blocks others in groups to get into flow? That jazz trio there. One of the things that blocks flow, as I see it, is you don't feel safe in the group. This isn't a space where I can be me, where I can say what I need to say, Now, that would be true in our one-on-one coaching with folks here. I would guess for each of us is if we don't create that safe space, then flow's not going to happen in our coaching conversations with them either. So having safety or a lack of it, feeling judged, uncomfortable if I say something, somebody's going to jump on me, then that will block a group of people from flow. For example, if that bass guitarist there didn't feel safe, maybe hitting a wrong note every once in a while, he wouldn't keep playing. But he felt safe with the other two because they had built that space that they could enjoy being who they were and what they were playing. So safety and lack of it is a key blocker with groups of people. I work with groups of people primarily. I do some one-on-one, but I have a mastermind I meet with on Tuesday mornings. We've been meeting for 9 months now, this particular group of us here. And one of the key pieces is to create a safe space for all of us and to teach other people how to do that. So that when we're in this group together on Tuesday mornings a little early, that flow can happen in the group because people feel it's okay. I'm accepted as I am. I will bring what I can, and they're going to both accept me, support me, and challenge me when they need to. So lack of safety blocks flow in groups. Another thing that blocks flow in groups is a common goal. What if those 3 musicians playing jazz were all playing a different piece of music? Now, that might have been interesting to hear. And being jazz musicians, they were kind of playing it in a unique way, which they would never play it again. But they had a common goal. They had a common understanding of where the music was going to go and what key it was in and what chords would be the basis of it. So one of the things that I know blocks flow in groups is when we don't have a common goal. And that's really critical for the leader to make sure that there's a common goal. For us in our coaching, one of the first things we ask is, what do you want to accomplish today? Let's find out what that common goal is today for our coaching session for you, so we can work together on that, partner up on it. So lack of a common goal is a blocker with groups. A third one to me, and it comes back to us as coaches, is good listening more than good speaking. Particularly in a group, that we are careful to learn how to listen to other people and let them know they're heard. This is critical in a tech startup, that people can know that they've been heard in what they just said, so that others will know that they'll be heard when they say something. And when we really listen to each other, then some amazing things can happen when a group gets into flow, when they're really listening to each other more than speaking to each other, if that makes sense. A lack of listening will block flow in a group every time. And the last one here is just the sense of this is collaborative. Several of us that you're looking at right now have met almost weekly for the last year. And it's a collaborative effort, and we adjust to each other, and we accept the uniquenesses of each of us. And there's not one person that's dominating the conversation. It's all of us count. There's a collaboration. We count on each other. We value each other. And when that's not in a group, when it's just somebody driving the group, you may get some things accomplished, but you're not going to get into flow. So those are 4 things, Iris, that I learned from my work with people, because life is about relationships. Good to be working one-on-one with people or just on ourselves, but we're in these relationships with others, in our families, in our work teams, in our communities, wherever we might be. And to understand what the blockers are for good flow in those groups is important as well. There's been some good research on this. 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪 a guy named Keith Sawyer who wrote a book on, can't remember the book is, it's earlier in the century, but just taking what the flow research is taken and using it with groups. So there's some good research out there now. He's at the University of North Carolina, psychologist, educator. So there's good work out there. Um, there are blockers individually. We've identified a number of them: distractions, overwhelm, so many of the things that will block us, but they also, those and others, block us when we're in a group together. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, really key pieces there. And one that resonates deeply, I think, to those of us who have worked in the corporate world is definitely safety, especially as a woman working in the corporate world and being an executive. I just didn't really recognize or allow myself to recognize that there was a lot of fear underneath until I did all of my own inner and emotional work and realized that a big piece of my burnout was that I didn't feel safe in a corporate environment where there's a lot of fear going on. So there's more power games and actual, teamwork.
Yeah.
And so that was a big piece for me as a woman to recognize that I didn't recognize, and I wasn't working on that, and I wouldn't allow myself to see myself as afraid. And I was, always trying to become more and more manly so I could show more and more, courage in the work environment. But that was really eating me up inside. And clearly, there was no group flow in the corporate world in general. There's a lot of burnout going on. So I think that's a big piece that speaks to a lot of us, and it's an important one in safety. And perfect moment to talk about some mechanics of how do we release all those crazy blockers all around us. So I'd like to invite Beth and just tell us really quickly, what is your niche and expertise, Beth?
Hi, I'm so privileged to be here. Thank you for including me, Iris, and Rory for setting this up. I don't know any of you. I don't think really directly. I've been on the periphery of this program, but my history is I'm a recovering competitive mountain athlete, gravity athlete. And that's where most of my coaching and my flow experience come from. I'm also a creative, meaning I work in the arts at different levels, meaning professionally and non-professionally, exploring sort of how that serves to reignite flow, and sort of remove some of these blocks. But what I'm going to talk about today, I am in the corporate world in real estate as well. So I'm finding that I came here to learn how to reinterpret the flow that I've known since I was 5 from athletics and my creative experiences into a work environment, into even a corporate. So I'm in that interface, and I use it as a communication tool because I've coached since I was 13 in athletics. I'm not coaching right now. I'm using this as a tool to reinterpret the world, essentially. So I'm going to talk about the logistics and practices of moving through flow blockers. In honor and recognition of autumn equinox this time of year, I think letting go is a really appropriate discussion. It's an opportunity to communally recognize unnecessary burdens that we're carrying, damaging practices that we may be persisting with, and integrate the new. Historically, for thousands of years, we've had communal opportunities to fast, to experience communal rituals. Like you've talked about, Harlan, this group setting isn't some anomaly or some kind of concept. It's something that we come from. And I'm not going to talk about communal pagan rituals right now, but to be launching these ideas in this context, I think is really important to remember. The mechanisms of letting go start by recognizing where your comfort zone is, where your boundaries and thresholds are, with respect and gentleness, that you can redefine your goals in the world you work in. You can expand what your goals are instead of bumping up against the fear of success, like we've talked about. You can create new neural pathways. And then all of this requires a softening. So I'm going to take the example of yin yoga as an environment where your parasympathetic nervous system is supported with tools to help you disentangle blocks in your body, tight bound muscles, fascia, and tissue. That can lead also to a significant emotional release. In that context, we can start to understand how the body and mind work together. through experiencing and feeling the constant constriction and release and the comparison between those two sensations. We slowly detach stale, bound fluid. And through that fluid, our blocks become porous. So this is a physical example of how literally we are breaking down blocks in our body and how that can work in our minds as well, and in our cognitive world. As you soften your grip against gravity, in this case, the blocks become porous, they may dissipate. In this place, you find mobility, range of motion, potential strength. These layers are peeled away and the tissue can be remodeled. So we're building new architecture and we're confronting perceived blocks. We're rendering them vulnerable for reconstruction, allowing you to build new architecture around that. So where resistance meets gravity, that's where we find vulnerability and softening, and enables us to redefine. But first we have to identify our blocks and not just say, hey, they're there, they're sitting there. We scrutinize them. We don't just get curious about them, but we get really proactive about breaking them down, exposing them to investigation. In the same way you would look at a block in a pain in your back, and you don't want to do yin yoga, but you're going to go to acupuncture, you're going to go to a therapist, you're going to go to any range of different Reiki or physical practitioner to get different views on that, to get different experiences. You're going to try different mobility exercises to get different experiences in your body. This is the kind of thing where we expand our community essentially within a block to help us analyze and break down what it is and how it's working. A question in this moment and for this sort of topic would be, where do you push up against resistance in the places you want to go and activities you do and the things that you feel? How could you relax your fear of resistance and let go in your body and mind and allow yourself to observe and get curious? A piece in this reconstruction of new ideals is curating a new ecosystem. Flow grows in ecosystems that both support and stress. Curating an ecosystem using coordinates that align with your ideals. You frequent these new spaces and identities and people, and you build familiarity so that your ecosystem is constructed around more intelligent people. Building an intelligent ecosystem is not just with people, but it's integrating your nervous system to environments that are complete. Ecosystems are symbiotic. You imagine going into a forest ecosystem. You're not going out there to study the trees. You're looking at all of the elements in nature, from the birds to the water and everything in between. So think of your ecosystem, your personal ecosystem, as looking at all of those details and all of those symbiotic layers that you interact with on a daily basis and how you can reconstruct them. So imagine yourself as being a coder in Westworld. What would your Westworld look like? How would you code your world? If you see in the movie, you understand the precision that it takes to build the hosts. So think about life in that level of detail. Like, really look at the things around you and the things that you do and your ecosystem and how that supports you or doesn't. In that, you're going to butt up against pain. And so redefining pain, look inquisitively into those pain spots. Here's where you're going to gain the most tools and the strongest tools for building sustainable neuronal architecture with stability and grace. A question would be, what do you do when you feel pain, emotional or physical? Think about your response, whether it's when you lose somebody or you're diagnosed with cancer or somewhere in between. In the ecosystem, of course, you have guides and mentors. The guides support your ideals, but you're not mimicking or copying your guides. Your guides you're positioning yourself to integrate practices that are modeled after what you see within that guide's rhythm and pattern that you want to integrate. So you're building your own very personal rituals and very personal, very integrated interpretations of those mentors' patterns. A question at this point would be, write down 3 new mentors that you wouldn't have considered mentors before. And one thing I think is really critical is creating a sacred, safe space now where you can downregulate your nervous system. Parasympathetic is a state that we need to be in order to heal. We all have things to heal and rebuild. And that's we use sleep as an example, but we can do this in our waking moments through hypnosis and through just creating a safe space. That might be in your closet. I used to work with women who were recently incarcerated and have multiple co-occurring mental health issues. And while they didn't have their own spaces, I would still ask them to find that. And they got very creative. One found space under a bush outside in front of her house, and it became her sanctuary and literally the only place she felt safe in this world. So I knew another person I worked with he was imprisoned, and he created space in a janitor's closet. He would illegally sneak in there and meditate, and became a very hardcore Buddhist practitioner through revisiting sacred space. It's a space that exemplifies where you are right now. And in that space, I would encourage you to use sound, vibrations, different levels of hertz, sound that is not music. These are tones. What they do is fill the space to help support the noise that's in your head so that you can be in silence and allow yourself to hear what you need to hear. These things take time, a lot of time. A question here would be, do you have a sacred space? Can you make one? Where might that be? One thing that's really close to me is wildness and wild nature. And we talk about being out in nature, but I talk about being in wild nature. I think that for me has been the most profound experience of my life, to experience a tremendous amount of my life and time moving through wild nature, experiencing wild animals, wild storms, wild water, everything. There's tons of evidence that shows how fast we heal when we're in calibration with nature. It does not have to be repeated, but I think going into wild nature is really what we have to do. Interacting with wild animals, with changing weather and storms, being extreme as you can while staying safe. How can you find wild nature, wild light, wild water, the most untouched possible? And let yourself feel free to roam in that space and build experiences in that wild nature and see what happens. And the last point is create. To me, creativity without using your words, without using writing, without using your cerebral cortex. So that means drawing, painting, moving, gardening, but being intentional in a space that's new, that's uncomfortable. And going back there over again, we always want to reinforce who we are in the way we work and automate things. We love to automate things. I'm really looking at how can we estrange ourselves and feel a sense of curiosity and sense of fearlessness, and understand really clearly what are the threats, not create threats everywhere we go when it's just something new. So creativity is simply solving problems. It's not necessarily making stuff or making art. It's using your mind and body in ways that extend into the unknown and the unfamiliar. It's not necessarily mysterious, though it can be, but it's just using your senses in a different way. In the same way, going into wild nature requires, in order to stay alive, it requires you to use your ears, your nose, your eyes, your sense of smell and taste. Your brain is your body. You cannot survive without it. A personal story just to close up. I've just had my second cancer surgery treatment, currently recovering, bumping up against my threshold of pain daily and temporarily trying to get out of some of my old patterns. Climbing mountains, mountain biking, and very rigorous creative practices. My anxiety of losing that is very real. So as I slowly learned to look at my blocks, dissolve them, open them up, unpack them, and dissolve my goals and expectations. I allow them to be more porous. My pain dissipates. My body is in more of a position to increase blood flow. My neural pathways are expanding as I'm doing activities I've never done before, like slow walking. I know that sounds crazy. But my nervous system now can focus more on healing instead of protecting me from falls, lightning, and bears, my familiar world. I made a vow. I will relinquish my obsession to obtain a goal and be more involved in process observation, subtle changes in sounds, underlying sensory information and messages as I slowly move through my life. And I'll trust that in this liminal space, I'm safe. I'm permitted transformation for new neural pathways and life evolution. Here, I recognize the privilege it is to be alive, to be able to fully feel and experience evolution. So thank you all for listening and including me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you. That was so beautiful. Very, very extensive and profound. I found it amazing, and I relate to all of them, but one in particular is definitely communal rituals was something really deeply, profoundly moving and healing for me in my life. And I'm sure everybody here might have one of many releases that you mentioned to be really meaningful in their lives. And I would love to invite everybody to say a few last words, but just to honor time, we have 4 more minutes until time is up, even though we did start 10 minutes late. Sorry, everybody, for the tech issues. We live in a tech world. So to honor everybody's time, if anybody has to leave, feel free to do so. And if everybody is okay to stay a little bit longer, we can extend another 5-10 minutes just to have a few more words and thoughts and shares and solutions that you'd like to offer to every flow blocker that we spoke to. So whoever wants to speak, just raise your hands and then I will call you in. All right, let's start with Harland and then we'll go with Maxime. And you can also raise your virtual hands, everybody else.
Sure. Beth, thank you. Creative. Got me thinking. New ways of approaching things that are blocking me. I love it. I'm not sure I'm going to go out and play with bears, but wild, to go a little wilder than I've gone is one of the things I heard from you. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Okay, Maxime.
Thank you, everybody, for contributing to this. We are literally in the flow and playing jazz. To start, I mean, it may be overwhelming and confusing if we hear all this. Where do we start? I think if I were to answer that question, is start with self-awareness. And in the positive psychology of flow, is to know yourself from the strength point of view. There are tools like 𝗍𝘁𝗪 and 𝗍𝘀, which you can take to know where you at, how you operate as a person, your natural talent, your natural way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So start from there. Like for me, the breakthrough was when I know I'm a ideation and futuristic generator. That was the root cause of my all overwhelm. So get started from that self-awareness.
Beautifully said. It all starts with that. John?
Yeah, I just wanted to introduce the concept of neuroplasticity in all this. So, we talked about distractions and ways of self-sabotaging ourselves and blocking ourselves from the states of flow. So our brains are literally they're literally rewired based on our attention patterns. So if we're going to allow ourselves to be chronically distracted, it creates neural pathways that make sustained attention increasingly difficult. But it also means that focused attention can be retrained through deliberate practice. So, in other words, there's a terrific quote by James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, who said, "The life we purchase is paid for by where we spend our attention," and that's so true when you think about it. If you're allowing yourself to become distracted and doom scrolling on your smartphone, that's the quality of life that you're going to have. Versus if you make a concerted effort and intentionally direct your attention to focusing on the work that matters to you and the work that's most important in your life, the chances that you're going to create a high quality life for yourself dramatically improve. So I just wanted to close on that thought, that notion.
Beautifully said. Sarah?
John, thank you. You have just sparked a thought in my head, which is another quote that 𝗕𝗏𝗪, the poet, I'm a huge fan. And in one of her poems, she has a line saying, "Attention is the beginning of devotion." And that, for me, is the power of overcoming some of these flow blockers. You know, pick one thing, get a better night's sleep, make it dark, make it quiet, because our attention allows us to express the things and make an impact on the things that we are devoted to. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Sarah. And Rory?
Oh, I've loved this. I've loved this. I just one thing that's coming up for me that we didn't get to talk about around the mindset piece. So I would really briefly also say that around how to manage the mind in so many ways. Obviously, yeah, through the attention is the key in the ignition in a lot of ways. I just wanted to share a really brief way that I put together around understanding or remembering through the coaching helped me to and leadership trainings was to help me to understand what my values were on a deep level. And so when we get to present to our values, when we are present to a value, when we have an attention on any value, we can't feel necessarily blocked unless we're focusing on that and we want to be doing something else. But the point being is that there was I've changed a lot of habits and had a lot of social anxiety, and I stopped drinking, and I still wanted to go out and be around other people that were drinking. So one of the blockers would have been I'm just not going to go out, and then that would actually mean that I'm more isolating and against my values, which is connection with people. But my only what I know to be a drive is to be around people that could potentially be drinking alcohol. So I get to learn how to do that. So I pulled together like a card system, and I had over eight different highest value cards, and I can pull a card, and it's this one says contribution written on it, and this one's in green to provide contribution, to share or give or put out contribution, which again I can then relate back to like helping moderate this group. I've helped to contribute to this group by helping to moderate it. And so just again, it always comes back to I can make a meaning from that and then feel in alignment with my true values. Then I can immediately it's almost like going from blocking into triggering something. So it's that circle of from block to trigger. So I just wanted to share that as well, because I really found it quite important. Thank you.
Very important piece, beautifully said. And Sandra?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's beautiful. One of my values, Rory, which appeared unexpectedly a few years ago, was actually community. And I find myself being in lots of beautiful communities, and that sharing and learning from each of us, even as we're here, there are takeaways that I've had from everyone's contributions. I think from the program, the Flow program that we were all on, the biggest one I think that I've taken away is recovery, and that's the investment in my own recovery. I thought I was good, but I actually realized there's so much more that can be done, and to really make time for that. And that, and Beth, that connects me to the things that you were talking about, the slowing down, the rediscovery, the breathing. I've been through my own, I am going through my own kind of health challenges, and the notion that I can work through some of this with breath is really, on the one hand, my logical brain says, what? on the other side, my being says yes, and it is that learning new habits, new ways of being. So recovery would be one of my offer, the investment in looking after ourselves in a very active way, and I use that a lot with my clients. But also a deep thanks for having the opportunity to be here with everyone and learning different insights to take away and share.
Yes, yes, it's very enriching to be in group flow, which we have certainly been here. And I just want to say one piece when it comes to flow blockers and the motivation piece that was really powerful for me is that the way I've come to look at blockers are like challenges and opportunities for expansion, for our next level of growth. And I've come to see my journey and my life and all of our lives on some level as the heroine's journey. And because I love playing games and I love challenges and I love learning and I love becoming good at things, I just kind of shifted into this understanding that we are in the hero's journey. We are the hero of our own journey. And when we answer the call to adventure, which is the flow blockers, I guess, on some level, and all the blocks of our world, we do open up to the possibilities and the expansion and the growth of our next version. And for me, in my heroine's journey, the call to adventure was really like the major blocker was really like my emotional intelligence level. And as I worked through that, then the next piece, the catalyzer, was getting clear on my intrinsic motivator, finding my massively transformative purpose was just catalyzed me into this level of clarity to be able to set myself up for the next level of who I want to become and take this journey and this training and be part of this great process of growth with all of you. And so I'd like to thank everyone for joining the series and for being part of this community. And anybody who's going to be watching this on repeat or live, I invite everybody to check out all of our live conversations and the YouTube playlist that we have compiled. And if anybody has anything else that they want to add as a final piece. All right. Then I would just like to say thank you. You have all enriched this experience, not only of flow, blockers and all of the topics that we have covered here, but the experience of really expanding and understanding how community can really be a powerful catalyzer for ourselves and our communities as well. So thank you, all of you guys.
Thank you. Yay, keep scaling our flow.
See you in our next collaborative projects. Looking forward.
Bye-bye now.
Likewise.
Good to see everybody.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
folks.